It's time to get sexy, so watch Secular Sexuality live Thursdays at 7 p.m. Central. Visit tiny.cc/YTSS and call into the show at 512-991-9242 or connect to the show online at tiny.cc/callsex.
Welcome to Talk Heathen, everybody. My name's Kenneth. With me today is the incomparable Jmike.
Hello.
How you doing, man?
I'm good. I'm getting a haircut apparently, so I'm doing good.
Yeah, I don't know what the hell that's about.
Yeah, don't be surprised if not a single hair is removed from my head. It's just the way it works. It's made of steel, so he's gonna have a hard time getting the locks off.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like there's something subliminal being said, from the producers here putting that up behind you, but yeah.
It could be the fact that we're creeping on 1 million subscribers for the nonprofits, and then this might be a reality behind me if that's
true.
Happens. So
is that the goal? Is at 1 million subs you get the snip?
I guess so. I'm the snip. Yeah.
I mean a haircut, not a vasectomy.
I'm already in works to have it the beanie sometimes I wear on the show. I'm sneaking that into some shows so that when I wear it fully, if we get to 1 million, I will attach the hair once it's removed to the hat, and then I'll put it on as a loophole to still have the hair, but still go with the bed. And so, yeah, so okay. I went either way.
Nice. Well, now that we've got that established, let's jump into a call. Why not? We've got a caller on the line, Amit, who wants to talk about evidence. Amit, how's it going?
Hey guys, it's Amit. Big fan of the show. Thanks for taking me in. Yeah,
sure,
of course.
Yeah, so just a little bit of background. I'm an atheist. My father was an agnostic, so I was raised in a non-religious household. So anytime I debate with Christians or Muslims, I'm running into an issue. I'm always getting hit with biblical and Quranic verses, and they're using that as if it's some sort of a punch towards me, as if it's a trump card. And as somebody who's never been raised religiously, this is completely new to me. You guys are former religious people. I mean, when you were religious, have you ever used any biblical verses towards like non-religious people? And if so, how did you feel when you were using it, and what caused you to say, hey, this doesn't make sense anymore?
This is a great question. So I can tell you that when I was a Christian, that I absolutely would quote Bible verses at people. The reason why I thought that this was effective was because the Bible says that the Word of God is effective in this way, that you can just give it to people. And there's passages that say things like that the Bible is, it's sharper than a two-edged sword, and it'll cut through to people. And there's a biblical basis for just quoting the Bible at somebody as if that's going to do something. And frankly, this is just one of several things that the Bible is wrong about. So now when I'm engaging with people, and it's funny that you should ask this question, because just yesterday I had a number of people in a discussion I was involved with online doing this, just quoting Bible verses at me without doing anything beforehand to establish why I should take the things that the Bible says seriously. So it's an interesting conundrum we run up against with these people, because their book tells them that this is an effective practice, but it is not an effective practice. And if you were to say that to them, they'll say, well, I know you're wrong because you disagree with the book, and the book's right, and I know the book is right because the book says it's right. You may see a problem here.
Oh.
So the thing that I do with people. I'm sorry, say that one more time.
Like, do they think you guys come from like a non-religious background where they're like, hey, these heathens have never heard the word of God, I'm just going to throw quotes at them? Like, do they just assume you guys don't know anything about the Bible?
That's how it starts.
Yeah, and I actually didn't come from a Christian background. I say a spiritualist background because I made things up in that realm that I thought, I was like, yeah, that sounds good to me. I want to think there's more to, nature, and everything is consciousness and all this stuff. And so I have a background in having beliefs that were ill-formed, but from the Christian standpoint, I'm probably more on your side, but I have a bunch of issues with it. So like, one is what's being said to you is just the claim, right? So if someone just says, well, it says so in this book, like, that's fine. I get that that's what the claim is. Two things. One, I mean, you wouldn't take like some murderer's testimony in some book that say he writes an autobiography. It's like, I didn't do it, right? Like, that alone doesn't establish whether or not he did or not. There's still some independent attestation. Same if I gave you like some physics book or biology book, and then I said, well, you don't understand physics or cosmology. Like, you don't understand some process in stars, like nuclear, I think it's stellar nucleosynthesis or something, where you have like elements fusing, right? Like, I could just go, it says this in this book, right? And that happens, but that's not the basis on why cosmologists believe it, right? It's not because it was written in some book. There's independent attestation at which you apply to the claim, right? It doesn't fall on just the merit of the claim. The other issue is there's an issue with, like, if you're telling me that you're going to use the book, and I can go to Proverbs 3, for example, right? And just be like, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean on not your own understanding. If you want to take that route, all I have to do is point out that is a tactic used by con men. Like, that's how people get fooled and tricked in every aspect, is to say, don't lean on your own understanding. Don't lean on independent attestation for the claim, but instead just believe it, right? Like quantum mythicists do this a lot. They'll say, if you don't believe in crystal healing or something like that, it's not going to work for you, which is just another way to say, if you don't buy into the claim I'm saying, it's not going to work from the get-go. And that's just not how the epistemology should work.
Right. If you don't set yourself up for confirmation bias, then it's not going to work. Right.
Yeah. And then there's a third point, and I sorry I go on long on this, but this is the most important one to me about when you talk about interpretation or reading the text. I have this issue as a non-believer that has always put a roadblock for me believing any of these claims just from the get-go, which is, if the book is God's intentions and desires, whether it's the Quran or whether it's the Bible, presumably what's given to me in the book is supposed to align with God's intentions and desires. Okay, that's not something a Christian or a Muslim is going to disagree with the Quran or the Bible. The problem is that when you read a book, anything at all, philosophy, some book, there's an issue of interpretation, right? This is why we have thousands of different sects that don't agree. And so the criticism that I always try to offer is, how do you know the interpretive principle that you use, whether it's literal or metaphorical, is the right one, right? How do you know that God didn't mean X instead of Y? And if they just say the Holy Spirit, you just point out that another Christian that disagrees with that verse also uses the Holy Spirit to justify it, and they come to contradictory conclusions.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, but
this is very similar.
Like, they always go back to, yeah, but I feel it, and I'm like, how am I supposed to dispute that? I don't know.
So,
you just say, I don't feel it. That's the same claim.
Sure. Or what I like to do with people when they start quoting their book at me is start with one foundational question. I'll ask them, why should anyone care? Or I'll say, why should I care about what this book has to say about anything? Okay. And hopefully that gives them, sort of a question they can chew on, and they'll stop and think about it. This does not always work. More often than not, they just keep quoting the book at me. And I'll say, okay, so we've firmly established that you've got a book that says some things. So with Christians, what I like to do, I literally did this yesterday with some folks. I was like, okay, you've got a book that says a thing. Are you at all worried that the Quran says that if you reject how, the revelation of Allah to the Prophet Muhammad, that you're going to be punished severely for this? Does that concern you? Because there's another book over there that also says some things. And they'll say no. They're not worried. They don't lose a moment's sleep over the claims that are being made in the Quran, because it hasn't been established yet to them why they should care. And I'll say that feeling that you have of not caring, that lack of concern you have for the claims being made by that book, are exactly how I feel toward your book. So if you and the whole goal isn't to be like your book's bullshit, or to be like everything that your book says is wrong, or you're dumb for believing that. It's just to get them to think about their sort of epistemic footing. Okay, they're convinced by the claims of a book. Why? And why should I care? That's the entire game. Is just if you can get them to have that little bit of openness, then you're opening the door to having hopefully an honest exchange of ideas. You're opening the door to conversation. And that's the best you can hope for in my experience.
Yeah. So following up on that, you say a little bit of openness. Like the difficulty is getting them to that point, right? It's like they're always on the defensive. Anytime I'm like, hey, I'm an atheist or I'm agnostic, and why should I believe these claims? They're immediately going to go to these. Here are these 4 or 5 punchy statements I'm going to throw, and it's going to reinforce my belief, and I'm not going to open up. Like, how do you get people to actually open up? Has it actually worked for you guys?
Yeah. You have to find points of agreement. So the thing that I like to do, and Jmike might have a totally different tactic. What I like to do is say, listen, in principle, I don't have any objection to believing all the things that you're telling me, but I really, really care about whether or not the things that I believe are true. So do you care if the things that you believe are true? And they'll say, of course.
Well, especially considering you did believe those things.
Right. So it'll go, okay, listen. And I'll tell people that Philippians 4:8, when it talks about, that Christians are supposed to think on whatever is true, that verse was what sort of led me away from the faith, because the more I examined the claims being made in the Bible and thinking about whether or not I had good reasons to think they were true, I just didn't. So I had to let them go, because I care about whether my beliefs are true. So I'll tell people, listen, can we agree that we care about whether our beliefs are true? Yes, great. Okay, so how do we go about, what are the methods that we can use to figure out if things we believe are true? So you have to, and once you're there, once you can start applying principles of reason and skepticism, I mean, really, frankly, common sense stuff. Okay, that's where you can start to open the door. But if you can't get people to start with, I care about whether or not my beliefs are true, and then agreeing on ways to test claims, then you're not going to get anywhere.
Yeah. For me, I would add, there's not a silver bullet. Like I'm someone that's going to say, I don't think there's a silver bullet for really either side. Even if you get into like the philosophy side, I don't think you're going to give someone some like argument that's like, oh, atheism's true or theism's true. Yeah. Right. I don't think that works. It's all going to break down to, looking at things that and then establishing and finding kind of a bread trail of, okay, well, why is it that I know that thing is true? Well, I know X is true because it went through some rigorous standard of some methodology like science, right? Produce some novel predictions for me to confirm it in the future. I applied some falsification criterion at which I could know that the claim is false given a set of circumstances, right? And so that's, to me, if I'm saying my epistemology when I talk to somebody, I go, it seems to be the case that for any claim I have, I should be able to try to falsify it and should be able to have some way of showing it not true. And then the other person is so steadfast on a claim at which we can't falsify. We can't even apply some falsification criterion in any way. The only thing I can get them to try to understand is to kind of go back to what Kenneth said about all these other books. Like, why is it that you have a God that seemingly throws a needle in a haystack that uses the same, because the methodology that the Christian's going to use or the Muslim's going to use is to go back to what it says in the book. But then it's like, why did this God hand down the most important information possible, right, about the nature of reality, and then sprinkled in more false beliefs in the same form of methodology with the same books, and stuck a needle in the haystack and said, good luck, go find it, right? And if someone wants to claim like, yeah, well, you just have to look at the text, then I don't know in virtue of what is different for all the false things that have been presented, right? It just seems like this thing doesn't even want you to know it's true if it's using all these ways to disguise it, right? I don't know that we would have some school system where the superintendent decides, or whoever decides the curriculum goes, it's a school for all blind people, right? Or let's say all people that can see, and then they give it every book in Braille, right? How is that even a fair scenario for me to gain knowledge if all of it's riddled with the same faulty mechanism, right? I don't understand. That's always what it comes down to me. They might not bite that and say, okay, I understand your point, but I would just point out the fact that why is your methodology so... Sorry?
Yeah, I mean, at that point, wouldn't they just revert back to, hey, God works in mysterious ways. You just have to have faith.
If it's mysterious, then you can't make claims towards knowledge of knowing it, right? If it's mysterious, right, then it could just be the case that whatever's presented to you is some deception. I mean, that's mysterious. I don't know what separates the claims, like what, and then to say it's faith, like I can just say I have faith that your claim is wrong, and we're on an epistemic par. How do we differentiate that? We introduce something called evidence, and then once we do that, then we see, okay, there's not a single candidate explanation for the supernatural. So you don't even get to posit that as some explanation for whatever phenomena until you demonstrated some candidate explanation. So at any time you add this sprinkling of supernaturalism to it, I could just reject it, because the only thing that's been demonstrated is that you have an imaginary concept. Okay, I'm rational in believing that it's only established as a concept and not as something that's manifested in reality.
Yeah. So Mike and I have sort of different approaches. And I think this might be by virtue of just me having been a Christian for many, many years. So I really like Socratic questioning. I really like just asking people questions so that they can sort of lead themselves out of the cave of dogma, right? Mike's putting people in the spin cycle, which it's totally valid. So what I like to do, I love it when the conversation comes back to faith. It might be my favorite thing to talk to religious believers about, because anything can be believed on faith. And you've heard hosts saying that on ACA shows for the last decade or more, right? So if you can explain to somebody that people who believe things that are different than what whoever you're talking to believes, and mutually exclusive things, that other people believe things on faith and they believe things on faith, and you can get them to see that there's nothing that you can't believe on faith, and then just ask them questions. Okay, so look, if faith can be used to believe things that aren't true, and if faith can be used to believe things that may be true, then faith is not useful for getting us anywhere closer to believing true things. We need something else. If we care about whether or not our beliefs are true, faith is not a useful tool. And you can ask them, what would be better than faith if we care about believing true things? And try to have the conversation. Okay. Because if they can admit that their beliefs are faith-based, then it's a very short little walk that you take them down to being able to say, okay, look, well, so faith is not a path to truth, as you've heard people on ACA shows saying forever. That's huge. So I hope you get people to admit that it all comes back to faith and to their allegedly holy texts, because if they're going to be honest about that, then it's a pretty easy talk. Just get all those steps in order. Do you care about whether or not the things you believe are true? Awesome. Okay. This book makes a lot of claims. You're saying you believe those claims based on faith. we know faith isn't a way to get to true conclusions. So now what? And let them figure it out.
No, but then it comes back to, okay, we need evidence, we need proof to investigate these claims. But even the word evidence is subjective in their minds. For example, for us, we observe, we hypothesize, we test, peer review, and then we're like, hey, this is legit. Versus for them is the Bible is true. We need to find evidence to support this, right? So even the definition of evidence is ambiguous. At that point, how do I meet them halfway?
Yeah,
there is no halfway.
You've got to agree on terms. You have to agree on terms. So if with people, I like to use a very broad definition of evidence. I'll say anything that can be used to demonstrate that a claim is true, I will count as evidence. Anything. And then I'll tell them, as far as I'm aware, there is no evidence that like Christianity is true. So whatever they present to me, and it's you know, in my experience, it's fallacious arguments. That is what they've got. Okay, so it's okay if we can show you that this argument is fallacious, meaning we cannot, given the premises that you've given us, we cannot conclude that the conclusion is true, then this is not evidence, because you cannot use the argument that you're making to arrive at the conclusion Christianity is true. It doesn't jive. So now what? And leave that. And listen, this is just my advice to you. Other people are going to have different advice, but I would say make the definition for evidence super broad. Okay, because people will accuse you of having a closed mind. People will say, well, you just don't want to believe. And you're going to be like, no, I do. I want to believe true things. So if you have anything that can be used to demonstrate that your claim is true, I'm with you. I'll come with you on it. And then let them go to work.
Okay, fair enough.
It's frustrating.
Yeah, I just have one last question for you, Kenneth, specifically. Take yourself back to your religious self, but put yourself in that situation. And this is one of the arguments I used. I say, look, this is a God, supposedly a God who created solar systems, moons, planets, stars, quasars, galaxies, so on and so forth. And the proof is he turned some water into wine. Could he not turn off the sun for a brief second and the whole world could record that? Or could he not set off a supernova so every historian could record that? If, let's say you were your old religious self, how would you fight that claim where I'm like, look, he could have done all these things, but he did cheap parlor tricks like turning water into wine and supposedly walking on water. Do you really expect me and others to believe that, right?
So my old religious self probably would have fed you a response from some apologetic. But in the back of my head, there would have been me going, well, yeah, what about that? And I would have started chewing on that and tugging at that string. So with something like that, with someone saying, okay, look, these miracles are not super impressive. My instinct would have been, I think back then, to point to the cumulative miracles, look at all of the works of God in the Bible. I would have been in trouble. Because with something like that, you're asking a religious believer to be really honest. And what you're doing with a question like that is you're really digging up, I think, potential cognitive dissonance, where they're going to have a response sort of in the pocket that they've heard from a pastor or, an apologetic book or something, and they're going to want to feed that to you to defend their faith. And that would have been my impulse too. Defending the faith comes first. And this is why apologetics is a fundamentally dishonest field, because the purpose of apologetics is not arrive at a true conclusion. It's not follow the evidence where it leads. It's defend the faith. So you are starting from your conclusion and you're going to reason yourself backwards from there. And that is a good way to be wrong. So yeah, former religious me would have just engaged in some sort of apologetic way of avoiding dealing with like the real substance of the question and just firing something off to let me still feel good about believing in Jesus. And I think that's what you're likely to find from a lot of people. But we got more callers, my man. But thank you very much for this one. Hopefully this was at least a little bit helpful to you.
Yep. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And Amit, I would just say if you talk to a Christian, ask them about Proverbs 3 and see if that's just an admission that you are commanded to not reason, to not apply logical inferences, and to ignore demonstrable evidence of the contrary. And if they say that that verse does not mean that, then go back and listen to what I said about the issues with interpretation, because that points that out right there. A person can take the route to just go, that's not what actually God meant by that statement, which is the whole issue I have with language in general can be manipulated and changed and interpreted in so many ways that my claim is I don't think any person that's a Christian can claim they have access to, even if I assume God exists, that they have access to the speaker, because they're all contradicting each other with how they interpret the verse. And we can't just start from the fact alone that that's the right way to look at it. But yeah, I would cite Proverbs 3 and just see what they think about that.
Yeah. And there's others too. I mean, there's other things that where, for other people who might be listening, who want to, sort of tug on this string themselves. You can look at stories like when Satan takes Jesus into the wilderness to sort of tempt him. And Jesus says, you're not supposed to put the Lord your God to the test. Stuff like that. You can look at the whole story about Thomas, how Thomas is like, look, I don't buy the whole resurrection thing unless I see Jesus here and put my hands in his wounds and all that stuff. I'm not going to believe it. You've got the first skeptic in the Bible right there with Thomas. And what happens? Jesus comes in and he shames him for it. He's like, okay, look, I understand you needed evidence, but that's not good. Blessed are the people who don't want evidence. Blessed are the people who have not seen and yet believe. So there is a sort of a whole anti-intellectual theme going on there in the old Bible there. Hey, speaking of the Bible, we've got a caller who wants to talk about about Mary, about the Virgin Mary. So we've got okay, now that I've clicked on this, we've got a Kevin from New York. Is this the Kevin from New York?
Oh, God fucking damn it. I told her to... Okay, I go by K from nowhere, and I'm not from New York. My phone number is from New York.
Okay. I'm sorry about that. K from nowhere. All right.
You figured out my name. Now I'm no longer K.
I'll call you K. I'll call you whatever you want, man. Okay.
All right. No. It's just that I've been calling the show, and I've always gone by K, and it's whatever. Now I'm Kevin from nowhere. How are we doing today?
Okay. All right. Sorry about that. Yeah, we're good, man. So the question that I see here on the call screening thing is it more likely that Mary was a virgin and gave birth, or it was a lie? Is that the question?
Yeah, it's a question for the theists listening the show. Is it possible that she probably got knocked up somewhere and the dad decided to lie about it so he could sell her for a couple of sheep? Or that's a common practice back in the day, or that she was a virgin and she gave birth to, as a virgin, something that we've never heard of since, which is more likely.
Well, we can't know is the problem, right? We're removed 2,000 years right from the event, so we can't know, and it's always just going to fall back to the Christian saying, "No, God did this," and so then it just comes down to how do you actually know that was the case? And then it goes back to, well, a book says a thing. And then you go, okay, well, how do you know that the book says a thing is actually representative of reality? So I think it's almost a waste of time to present ideas like that, because for me, it comes off conspiracy theory like, and I don't like dealing with what ifs in the past and saying like, well, it could have just been, she could have, just lied because of some circumstance that she was in or whatever it might be. Right. And I just think that that's as bad of speculation as any. If you're removed, it's better just to keep the claim. Look, it was about easy way to put it. You got somebody saying that somebody was born of a virgin, right? You don't have to do very much work. Like, they're doing all the work for themselves to make that irrational. So you don't have to obfuscate how irrational the claim is to begin with. So
yeah.
And not, I'm sorry, let me back up. Not from a virgin birth, but a virgin birth from a supernatural entity that we don't know exists. right? So like ghost sex is what we're talking about.
Right.
Yeah. So
Ghost
let that roll down the hill, my friend. Let's just let that roll down the hill.
I just wanted to go the James Randi way. There was this video where he was explaining to people, right, which is more likely that I'm, doing magic and violating the rights of physics, or that I'm just tricking you into believing that this is actual magic,
It's interesting. Your question, it reminded me of the famous C.S. Lewis trilemma. And Jmike, are you familiar with this?
You talk about the legend, lore,
liar, lunatic,
legend.
or lord.
Yeah.
So C.S. Lewis used to present this argument. C.S. Lewis, one of the most overrated thinkers in the history of thinking. And he would say, Jesus made a bunch of really specific claims in the Gospels, okay? And a person who made these types of claims would either have been a liar, he's saying things that aren't true, a lunatic, he was a crazy person who believed stuff that wasn't true, or he was who he says he was, and he was the Lord, he was God. And one of the many reasons this is a shit argument is that it leaves out the possibility of, and we can keep the alliteration going with another L, of legend. It could be the case that these stories didn't happen at all. It could be like King Arthur and this, sword in the stone shit. I mean,
change the D to an E and make it lore.
Yeah, right.
So
with something like this, with a question like, is it more likely that Mary was a virgin and gave birth, or it was a lie? I have a reaction to the word lie, I think, because I don't think it's necessary for someone to lie. I think that, it could just be a fairy tale type of a deal. It could just be a story. I mean, there's tons of stories throughout human history of virgin births for various super sexist bullshit reasons.
Jesus,
so,
the first one. That's
not even close.
Thing to say. Yeah.
Yeah. Jesus being born of a virgin is not in any way a unique claim.
I think there's a term for it. I could probably say it runs like parthenogenesis or something.
Parthenogenesis.
Parthenogenesis. Yeah. So it's like
a reptile.
There's a term. Yeah, there's a term for this that predates the. I mean, not in the English, obviously, but I would agree with Kenneth there. What do you think, Kay? Oh,
Kay from nowhere.
Yeah, Kay from nowhere. What would be your response?
About what specifically?
Or just because I mean, your question was for theists. We're not theists, so we can't answer that. Yeah. But what would you say to our responses?
Pretty fair. I just want them to get to the more likely explanation. I don't want them to go to like fantasy land. That's all. One other thing, I was listening to you guys talk about faith.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Can I real fast? I'm sorry. I just want to say something. You said the most likely explanation. So here's my stance on that. Anything you say that's natural, no matter how crazy it is more likely than ghost sex.
And supernatural, yeah. Ghost sex.
So you can find the most insane thing on the naturalist side and use that because it's more likely. Why? Because if we put out like this on an Excel spreadsheet and I said like natural causes and then things that we could put in the supernatural category, like I can have a billion ad infinitum. I could come up with silly, stupid things that explain it, and they're all more likely than something that's never been demonstrated as a candidate explanation. So I just wanted to pause there because it's always more likely. That's the point.
Right. Ghost Sex, by the way, is going to be the title of the upcoming album Jmike and I are coming out with. So look forward to that, people.
It's not Ghost Sex. It was Ghost Rape. It was
some people cite Luke for consent, and I try to typically give as many toys as I can. Like whether you're right or wrong on that, it's just like, look, just give them what they can to play with because their claim does all the damage. To go back to my first point, so I'll give you every toy to play with, and I'll tell you it's adorable and cute, and then take life seriously after that.
Yeah, and likelihood would have to be demonstrated. So if somebody's saying it's more likely that Mary did give birth as a virgin, then the burden of proof would be on them to explain how they arrived at that conclusion. How did you figure out that was more likely? How'd you run those numbers?
A book says a thing. That's always what it comes down to.
That's the whole thing. So, all right, Kay, we got more stuff to move on to, but yeah, thank you for bringing poor Mary into this whole conversation.
All right, man. Have a good one. Now, one more thing. I want to say one thing. Is that cool?
Oh yeah, I did cut Kay off. So yes, please go.
Damn.
No, I was saying
you are live on the air, Kay. What do you got?
I was saying I cut you off, so that's my bad. Go ahead. Yeah.
I was just gonna say, what if Jesus was actually twins and the guy we've been worshiping is dead? Is actually his twin brother Bob Christ, right?
What if it's the same scenario, but they're wearing a little tiny hat? You could do this all day long, and it's still more likely than what the explanation actually is. In my opinion.
Exactly.
So,
exactly.
All right, man. Have a good one.
Have a good one, Kay. Yeah. Hey, look, I just want to take a moment to say, theists, you get priority when you call in. We want to talk to you. Okay. So I was engaged in conversation with people for hours yesterday who are making big, lofty claims about, the state of things with respect to God and what God wants and, what God has said in various books. Call in. We can have those conversations, especially the people who said that they had evidence. Call in and present that evidence. We are dying to hear it. And again, anything that can be used to demonstrate the truth of your claims. So to give you guys, you theists out there, I bet there's at least one or two lurking in the chat right now too. Call in. Don't just hang out and chat, people. So to give you guys a minute to call in, we do have some other callers on the line to get to, but I just want to get through our announcements real quick. So for those who might be here for the first time, Talk Heathen is a product of the Atheist Community of Austin, which is a 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to the promotion of positive atheism and the separation of religion and government. If you would like to support Talk Heathen and the work the ACA does, you can become a member. You could click the join button below this video. You could support us on Patreon. You can go to patreon.com/talkheathen to Jmike. We also have a channel that houses all of the shows the ACA does in audio podcast form. You can go to tiny.cc/AEN podcasts and download those ACA shows. That is how I typically consume my ACA content. I just listen to the podcast throughout the week because there's a bunch of great stuff that we're putting out on the various shows, whether you are into secular sexuality or Truth Wanted or us here at Talk Heathen. If you want to listen to AXP, it's all there in podcast form. You can become a part of the Talk Heathen community in our fan-run Facebook page. It's facebook.com/groups/TalkHeathenFG. It's a great community on there. And if you want to continue this discussion after the show, join myself and Jmike over in ACD, which is our fan-run Discord server. We're both going to be there at tiny.cc/ACA Discord. And stick around, because after this show, you're going to be able to watch, some would say, the flagship show of the ACA, The Nonprofits, which is going to be on at 3 p.m. Central Time. That's at youtube.com/.
Well, let me correct you, Kenneth. It's actually the flagship show of the Atheist Experience Network.
Exactly. And we're going to get them to 1 million subscribers so we can see what a short-haired Jmike looks like.
Yeah.
And with those out of the way, we also have a promo to show you. If you weren't able to catch all those ACA shows we're talking about last week, here's some of what you missed.
Be the porn you want to see in the world might be my new favorite catchphrase. I'm going to see if I can't get that done up on a t-shirt or whatever else.
Biblically, you have methodologically presupposed the divinity of our biblical Christological God within your start premise.
Biblically, I'm going to drop this call because biblically, I'm getting tired of this conversation.
Yeah. Just because I have a penis or something doesn't mean that you could prescribe that I ought to not have long hair or I shouldn't paint my nails categorically.
You're a fertile field that we would love to plow.
Alex, Johnny wants to plow you, but he might need to plow you further in a different show.
I don't know what you missed in science class, but if you think that vaccines just don't work, then you are no longer in touch with reality.
I wonder if he believes in what the experts say about gravity, or is he jumping off buildings? I don't know.
Whenever I see myself in promos, I feel like I'm the kid that's not supposed to be hanging out with all the cool kids, but I'm there. And so I'm just like, what's up?
And casually talking about your penis on the air. That's
using morality and that just go. You know what? Go watch the flagship show, and you can go see. I'm not gonna give anything away. So
that's right.
That was last week, though. So watch both episodes, not just one.
You're going to want to do both of those episodes for sure. All right. We're going to move on to another biblical question here with Richard in the UK talking about, did an historical Jesus exist? So we're talking about the ontology of an historical Jesus. Richard, how are you doing?
I'm good. Hello, chaps. How are you?
Better now.
How you doing?
Okay, so I'm going to be honest with you. I nicked this question from somebody in the chat who didn't want to call in, and
come on, chat person.
I've never heard you to actually speak on this, so I thought it'd be interesting to get your perspective on it. So that's it, really. Did a historical Jesus exist?
We can't know. I'm gonna say I'm not a mythicist. Me and Matt did a show. We kind of talked about this at the beginning, and I guess I'm similar to his position in that I'm not a mythicist. I can't claim that there was no historical Jesus. I just don't. I think the lack of contemporary evidence and the evidence surrounding it is not great. It's all. It all pertains back to non-contemporary sources, which for me that's if someone points out, well, what about this historical figure that has kind of the same attestation, but we think that person's real? I just go, well, if I find out that person's not real, it doesn't affect me in any way that if Jesus is real and is the Son of God or something, right? So, but even if we strip the Son of God part away, it's just, I don't know how you would be confident in that attestation, I guess is my position.
Yeah, and I would say I generally agree with that. I don't have any objection to the idea that there was an historical Jesus, that there was some rabbi with followers talking about loving your neighbor and whatnot. Sure, why not? Do I have any reason to think that whoever the historical Jesus is the individual described in the Gospels? No. Do I have any reason to think he walked on water or turned water into wine or raised people from the dead? Nope. So if there was an historical Jesus, I don't really know anything about who that person was. Would be my standpoint. I find that the question of if there was an historical Jesus typically has very little to do with
the actual
person that people are talking about when they're talking about Jesus.
So Kenneth, would you say that
about as a Bible character?
Yeah, would you say that Bible character, like you? Because actually, that brings a good point. Would you? Because if you're going to say that Jesus, I'm going to say firmly that one does not exist, and you would presumably say the same.
I have no reason to think that character was a real person, or that the events described in the Bible actually happened. None. And the same thing could be said of like an historical Moses. I have no reason to think that that any of that shit happened. So, this would be my position with respect to many biblical figures.
Yeah, I think it comes down to like what's more rational, and it seems to be not accepting the positive belief.
And what I find is that people who typically want to talk about an historical Jesus, they're trying very, very hard to establish some sort of like foundation that they can then start building claims on. Well, we know there was some real guy. Okay. And then they got all their work ahead of them.
Satya Sai Baba was a real guy.
I was actually going to ask you that next. If you think when Christians make that claim, they're using it as a kind of stepping stone to the supernatural claims about Jesus.
Yeah, I get that. I get that a lot. And the problem I have is, it'd almost be weird for me in one sense to think of it like, if there's a religion that focuses on a central figure and that central figure doesn't exist, that seems a little strange in itself, right? Like, of course religions start, of course people make things up, but to say that like the figure didn't exist, like, yeah, sure, there's nothing like illogical about it or something, but it does seem like it would make sense for it to source back to some. It's like saying, if like you had, and maybe the guy if you look into chiropractic work and look at kind of the guy that invented that, right? And you just were to say like, yeah, we found out this guy existed, say 2,000 years from now. Like, it doesn't add validity to the claim that what he was professing about chiropractic work has like some validity in the world, right? I mean, that's just two separate claims. So I almost hate when mythicists want to attack the figure part, because kind of like with the last caller, you have someone's presenting to you something that's doing its own damage. They think that this guy rose from the dead. And then they also think that if a guy rose from the dead, it entails Yahweh existed, which I don't see a logical contradiction, and aliens just raising up Jesus, right? There's still all these little crevices that they have to fill in. I'd rather just say, yep, Jesus existed, and prove the divinity, because that to me, that makes my mouth water, knowing that the claim is so easily defeatable. Right? But
in recent months, what I've been doing with people when they want to talk about an historical Jesus, they'll talk about extra biblical sources. They'll talk about Josephus or Tacitus, or these people making reference to people following a figure called Jesus, or a Jesus, brother of James, this kind of stuff. And none of this doesn't get us any closer to any of the gospel claims being true. So the one that I like to ask people about lately is I'll just ask them about, okay, there's a story in the Bible that Jesus went to a wedding and turned water into wine. Do we have any reason to think that any of the individual elements of this particular story are true? Can you give me anything that is evidence that Jesus turned water into wine, other than a book says a thing? And there's nothing. There is nothing. And this is true for all of the stories in the Gospels about Jesus. So, I try not to just go straight for the resurrection, because I would like for people to start thinking. And when I go straight to like the biggest alleged miracle that's in there, the mind is generally pretty closed when I'm dealing with believers. But I've been finding a little bit of success with getting people to go like, okay, well, I guess we don't really know if that happened. And once we get there, we can start having big conversations about the bigger claims. So, yeah.
Yeah, with the
Brilliant.
bigger claim.
Thank you.
Sorry, go ahead, Richard.
Oh, Mike, sorry. No,
I was just saying with the big. we got ourselves lost here. No, I was just saying with the bigger claims, on that front, I always try to run like, if we get to kind of where Kenneth is saying, once you do get to the resurrection part, and it all comes down to the evidentiary basis, quote unquote, is just saying that it says so in this book. And maybe people might cite like Paul's letters or things like with 500 witnesses or something, right? They might cite these things, but they're all predicated back to the claim of the book. And my thing is always to go, like, if you're the person that you trusted, right? Like your wife or someone like that tells you, that she saw the risen Tupac or Elvis or something. It's like, you're not going to just accept that claim. And that's like the most trusted person, but you trust Paul, like the writings of Paul from like 2,000 years ago that you're removed from the events, but you'd call your wife like a lunatic for saying like, I saw the risen Tupac, I saw the risen Elvis, like I watched it happen. Like, right. So if you finally get to that step, I feel like if you get there, I mean, it's like, you should point out the absurdity pretty obviously there for me, at least. It's just, you don't accept this from credible sources, but this person you've never met is somehow more credible than your wife that you actually know. Okay. Got it. Cool. I wonder how she feels about it, but yeah. So,
but yeah, hopefully that shines some light there, Richard, on our positions with respect to the historical Jesus.
Yeah, thank you very much, guys. I appreciate it. I'll speak to you soon.
All right. Have a good weekend. Yeah, it's an interesting, it is an interesting question. And I'm not a mythicist either. I find myself having to separate whatever people are saying about the historical Jesus from the Jesus they're actually talking about, because it's never been the same thing in any conversation I've ever had on the subject.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to waste time talking about whether or not someone existed, as opposed to like, no, you're making metaphysical claims about reality that are attributed to this guy.
Right.
Okay. So
making specific claims about things this person allegedly did.
Yeah.
Right.
So I grant you the first stepping stone. He existed. I'll even say 100%, just so that you don't have any issue going forward of like, but do you doubt Jesus? No. I'm with you on the existence of Jesus. Now get me to it matters, because I believe Satya Sai Baba existed. Didn't mean that the claims of miracles that he professed were actually true. It's a secondary investigation, but
he did have a sweet haircut though. Let's move on. We've got repeat caller Setuf calling in from España with a question that I don't know how to answer. The question is, what are your thoughts on the horny violinist analogy? And I've never heard it, so I don't know what my thoughts are.
Hi, thanks for taking my call. So
sure.
Yeah, it's a relatively new analogy. I actually came up with it with a friend today. Shout out to
Kenneth. You haven't heard about?
I feel less bad about not hearing about it before.
You haven't heard about it. It was came up with today.
I'm out of the loop
in private.
Okay, cool. Yeah, let's hear it.
I did already mention it on Truth Wanted. So we just modified it and made it the horny violinist, but it was already modified on Truth Wanted on Friday. But in any case, if you're interested, I would like to run it by you and hear what you think about it.
Sure. Can I say one thing, and maybe it might go between you and Kenneth? I'll say one thing is that I don't care about analogies really when it comes to this, because especially if we're going to just get to abortion, my answer is pretty simple. You're not going to trump the right of a person's own autonomy. I mean, that's just a simple principle. Whatever analogy that's drawn, I'm just going to go, yeah, that person didn't have the right to use the other person's body. But so I just wanted to point that out, that analogies don't seem to be successful in that way. And also, it's not the actual scenario which we're talking about. But anyway,
we don't know where this is going. We don't know where this is going.
I'm just pointing out that you guys might take this, and I probably will just listen.
Okay, well, we'll see. I hope we don't lose Jmike. So, okay, what is the horny violinist analogy?
Okay, so I just want to hear your thoughts. So I'm just going to go ahead and describe the scenario. So let's say there is a horny violinist who wants to have sex with me. And in this hypothetical, I have a condition which could make the next person I meet after having sex with a violinist actually physically depend on my body, right? So let's say we do have consensual sex. And after that, it happens that a third party becomes connected to me in such a way that disconnecting them will most likely result in their death. So now for this scenario, I've got two questions for you guys. The first one being, would you say I violated the bodily autonomy of the third party? And the second one would be, do you think it's immoral for me to disconnect the third party without their consent?
Did you violate the bodily autonomy of the third party?
I'm wondering what, because it's an analogy, presumably there's supposed to be a property at which is actually analogous. I'm not seeing that, because the scenario you draw is not the scenario of abortion, if that's what you're trying to get to.
That's a great point right out of the gate.
It's just a false, right? Like, do me better. Identify the property at which is analogous from the actual abortion scenario to the one that you're applying, because I'm not seeing that identified property in the analogy.
Okay, I mean, we can get to that. I'm just curious about the analogy as it stands right now, or the hypothetical, what your thoughts are. I mean, we can analyze where it's not analogous to pregnancy. I'm cool with that.
Yeah, but the screen, I think even says, or maybe it doesn't.
It just says, what are your thoughts on the horny violinist analogy?
I guess I'm just used to talking to Setuf on abortion.
Let's figure out. So what is this analogous to?
Well, the same as the original violence analogy.
No, but what Kenneth is asking is, it's an analogy.
Right.
If the analogy is successful, it's in virtue of whatever scenario it's supposed to be in accordance with. What is that?
Yeah. What is it?
If not abortion, what is it?
Yeah, it's pregnancy, consensual sex, and the question about the morality of the abortion.
Awesome. And so
yeah.
And so in that scenario, you're telling me that the fetus has the same properties the third person that's not a fetus?
In my hypothetical, no. But
so then it's not. So then it's not analogous.
Yeah, then it's not an analogous. So yeah, and I was wondering if you were doing this, and I was hoping you weren't. The whole thing, because in conversations we've had about this in the past, you've used the term being, and there's a lot of baggage that gets smuggled in under this word of being. So you in this attempted analogy, you're using the word person. So
yes.
Right. So you would need to establish that a developing fetus has the same properties of personhood.
Yeah. If we literally listed out the properties left and right, there would be traits that we would establish that aren't the same. Thus, they are not the same thing. Thus, you can't use it as an analogous property in your example.
Okay, then why are we using the violinist analogy for
this is why this
justify?
I don't use analogies. This is why I said before you said anything. This is why I wanted to say it before anyone said anything, because I didn't want to be accused of somebody that relies on violinist analogy or things. I don't care about analogies. I care about the actual scenario which we're talking about, because when it comes down to analogies, it's only analogous in virtue of properties you identify. Right. The problem is that if I list these properties out, we're gonna run into an error where it's not actually the properties listed, so it wouldn't be analogous. Which is why I don't like to use I'll use analogies for pragmatic reasons, but we're talking about something like this. I'd rather focus on the scenario, right? Demonstrate why a woman should not have a right to her autonomy. It's just simple. Just give me the argument for that. Because you're saying there's a situation where she loses that right. So please illuminate for me and the audience where that. Go ahead.
Well, I'm just asking you your thoughts on this violinist analogy, because there is a violinist analogy which is used to justify or to show that bodily autonomy does the right to somebody else.
I get that. I don't run that analogy, so I don't know why you're trying to straw man the position as if I would accept the analogy in the first place. I could not, but I don't know why you're just trying to bake that in there to fit what you want it to do.
No,
we've established that this analogy doesn't really work for what you're trying to use it for. So there's a better conversation that can be had.
If I understood you correctly, you said the main difference for you is that the third party is a being and a fetus is not, right?
Well, if you're going to make some sort of positive claim that a developing fetus should be classified as a being or as a person, and that therefore it's analogous to this hypothetical that you're proposing, you're going to need to demonstrate that there's something to that.
Okay, would you agree that some people do believe that a fetus is a being at some point in the pregnancy?
I don't give a fuck what some people believe.
Propositional attitudes or attitudes
it's irrelevant.
They're entirely irrelevant, because what is actually relevant is not the attitudes a person has towards like what the meaning of some utterance is, right? Because it's just a grunt. What matters is when we actually list out, okay, we have some grunt that stands for a person and some grunt that stands for a fetus. When we list out the properties of what makes that thing, right, that gives it its being or whatever, or essence or whatever you want to use, we're going to run into an issue where they're not analogous. So you can't use them interchangeably in an analogy.
Right.
It doesn't have to do with even if you use the word. The difference is that you think it's being and not being. I'm not going to use a word. I'm just going to say when we list out these properties, the fetus and the human are not the same thing. So you can't use a human in your analogy that way, which is why I don't use analogies for abortion. And I think ones that even are used for pro-choice are ill-formed. So we don't need to go back to why one version is successful, because I might not hold to that.
Okay, Jmike, then let me not strawman you and really steelman your position. When does a fetus become a person in your worldview?
Yeah, when it's not.
Well, you're not. Jmike's not the one making the argument that a fetus should be thought of as a person. That's your.
Yeah, it's also a pretty clear distinction between something that depends upon physical autonomy and something that does not. It's a true dichotomy. So I'll let you fill in how that works.
So things like brain activity and feeling pain.
Nothing. This has nothing to do with pain or any of that. This has to do with when something is autonomous and when something is not autonomous. When something is relying on the autonomy of another agent. When something is not relying on the autonomy of another agent.
Okay.
So I said nothing about pain. You're trying to steel man me and you keep straw manning me. I mean, I don't really know what we can do, because the analogy's already been, in my opinion, destroyed. I mean, I've already established that one thing is a property of depending upon a human, right from the offset. It's formed in that matter, and then the other is not. And then the other is some weird scenario that's not even actually like tangible to the reality we experience. Like the scenario you even bring up isn't something that it even happens. So I don't know what motivational force it's supposed to have. I think I don't know if we lost Satoof, but
it's showing that Satuf's still on the line. The thing I just always wonder is what's with the fixation on abortion? I mean,
yeah, I'm glad you asked. I can explain that to you. So I've been a long-time listener and viewer of the ACA, and I've heard in numerous occasions abortion being justified with the violence analogy, and I believe it's very flawed. This analogy is taking many things not into account, and I believe we should base our beliefs on good arguments and not on flawed arguments.
Satoof, do you think it's flawed for you to call in the show and in virtue of just seeing other ACA members or volunteers, whether they agree to an argument or not, think that means that the other hosts should also agree to that? That seems flawed. Because you did that, and I just demonstrated that I don't follow analogies like that.
I don't know what the violinist analogy is in the first place.
That is fine.
Yeah, I may have heard it in the past, but I have no idea what the violinist analogy is.
I just wanted to hear your thoughts on the analogy, but if it's too difficult to answer, that's also no problem.
No, I think it's too difficult for you to understand.
No, it's not an issue of too difficult, because it's been answered. The issue is that it is not analogous. You would have to demonstrate that the argument. Okay, then why are you saying that if we don't want to deal with the analogy because it's too difficult?
It's more simple than that, because if you actually had an analogous argument, it would, for the same reasons why I take the position on abortion, I would have no issues accepting on what is an analogous situation, because I would see, oh, okay, there's a scenario here that's analogous to say that one person's bodily autonomy is going to be violated. Yeah, I'm not going to go with that. But the problem is you didn't establish that in virtue of a property that defines properties that define a fetus versus properties
let's say
that define some human, right? You specifically used a human in your example.
That's fine. Let's say this third party did not exist and was forced into existence through this act. How is that different?
How is what forced into what act?
I mean, in my analogy or hypothetical, let's say we did not have this third party as some random person, but it was actually somebody who did not exist before and was forced into existence.
So you want to argue from
let's just make it a pregnancy. Let's just make it a pregnancy.
Yeah.
Let's just talk about it. Okay.
Yeah, that's
so
exactly.
if two people have consensual sex and that might lead to somebody potentially getting pregnant, is it wrong for them to terminate that pregnancy if they want to? I mean, is that what we're asking? Let's just get to it.
Yeah, if one considers this fetus a being and a person, that's the question, yes.
Well, I don't know what the beingness or the personhood even has to do with it. I think Jmike and I are in agreement that the question is one of bodily autonomy. If the person who is pregnant doesn't want to be pregnant anymore, then they should have every right to get rid of that pregnancy, to terminate that pregnancy. We're talking about ending a pregnancy. Okay, so is it morally right to allow people to end pregnancies that they don't want to carry to term? Yes. If morality is based on the well-being of conscious creatures, then yes, it is morally right to allow people to end pregnancies. I'm sorry?
The fetus at some point conscious, though. Is the fetus at some point during the pregnancy, does it become conscious?
That's irrelevant to my.
What does that have to do with anything that I just said?
You said it's about conscious creatures and their well-being. So I'm just asking you, are you taking the fetus's well-being into consideration?
Absolutely, yes.
So too, if he's you can take something into consideration and still apply a principle that if that thing has regardless if it has consciousness or not, it doesn't have the right over to live at the expense of another person, right? Another conscious creature, right? So I don't know where your hang up is on his position or even my position. If I was to say consciousness doesn't matter in my formulation at all, it's just the bare bones autonomy of the person that has their own autonomy, right? So and which side you go, I don't know where you're spotting a hang up or an issue.
Is it a moral good to allow people to have autonomy over their bodies? Yeah.
Yes, not unlimited though, which you have agreed, I think, with me, Kenneth, on a previous call. But
I would agree. But it goes back to this whole thing of a person's right to swing their fists ends where my face begins. Absolutely.
Exactly.
But these are not analogous situations. Someone swinging their fist around and hitting me in the face is not the same as an individual terminating a pregnancy for obvious reasons. I'm not even going to insult your intelligence by getting into why that is, because it's, come on.
No, I agree with you. They're not entirely the same. But anyway, I really just wanted to hear your opinion on this analogy, even if it's not analogous. I thought it's an interesting thought experiment. But still, thank you for the respectful conversation at the end of the day.
Yeah, sure. Cheers.
Sure. Yeah. And honestly, at some point, when you call in, it has you listed as a theist. I would love to hear you get away from the abortion stuff sometime and talk about what you believe and why with respect to a God belief, because that's kind of what this whole show is about.
I talk about fetus rights and also animal rights, if you are open to talk about animal rights and the morality of paying for animals to be slaughtered for our taste.
Are you a theist? Do you believe in a God or gods?
Yes, I am a theist. Well, according to your definition, I call myself a believer. So I'm not religious, but yeah.
What's the distinction?
Also talk about this in a previous call.
You believe in the proposition God exists, right? That's what you mean by believer.
Yeah.
Cool. So you're a theist. Okay. Yeah.
I wouldn't say I'm convinced, but yeah, I believe it.
Wait, you say I just got to dig in on this for 1 second, and we'll move on in a second. But okay, so it sounded to me like you just said you're not convinced, but you believe it. Is that what you just said?
Yeah, that's exactly what I just said. Yes.
What is your definition of belief?
Suspect to be true.
Suspect to be true?
You don't think that when you believe a proposition to be true, you're applying some sort of conviction?
Yeah, I would say it's the mental state of being convinced that a claim is true.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I'm really convinced. I would say I have a suspicion or an intuition that it might be so. So that's why I just say I'm a believer.
And an intuition that it might be so. Well,
Yeah.
is that based on anything? Is there any sort of what's the rationale there?
I mean, we did discuss this some weeks ago. I'm sure you forgot it. It's basically, I think you call it the argument from incredulity or something like this. My English is not the best. But basically, I cannot explain consciousness and thus have a suspicion based on no evidence.
Gotcha. Well, okay. Well, that would be a very interesting call to dig into sometime. I'm kind of getting the sense that you're not trying to have that call right now. So we're gonna move on. But thank you for calling in. We got a couple more callers to get through. Have a great week.
Guys.
Yep.
You too.
All right.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Okay. So really quick, super quick. Before we go, not too quick. Before we move on, we want to take a minute to thank our top 5 patrons. Okay, because without them, frankly, none of this shit would be going on. And we like that this shit's going on. So thank you to CJ Dennis, Eric Tweet, Dingleberry Jackson, Balam's Donkey, Paulia, and an honorary mention to number 6, Anthony Magnabosco. Hey.
Who's that?
On a scale of 1 to 100, I am 100% appreciative of Anthony Magnabosco and the rest of our.
But how do you know?
I have a justified true belief that all those people are awesome.
You're gonna run into Anthony on the street, and he's like, "I saw the show, and you were convinced that
you expressed a very high degree of certainty."
Yeah.
That
but what if I'm just a bad guy or something?
What if I suck? What
Yeah.
if this is, what would it take to convince you that to move you off of certainty, to be open to the idea that maybe I suck?
Yeah.
Nothing. I will not change my mind on this. Okay, we got a couple callers to get through, and we're running low on time. So let's dive in. We've got AR calling from an undisclosed location. AR is in a bunker somewhere.
It's actually called R.
R.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe. Hi. It says here that you want to talk about how positive atheism and veganism overlap. Is that accurate?
Well, that's kind of sort of. I think that the call screener was paraphrasing me to somewhat accuracy. Anyway.
Okay.
But
that's what we strive for around here: is somewhat accuracy.
Yes. Well, I'll try to clarify. And first of all, thanks for doing the show. I've been watching for years. This is the first opportunity I've had to call in live in all the years I've been doing it, because I do a lot of animal rescue work, and that's where in the positive atheism comes into play. Some time ago, one of the hosts, it may have been Matt, said that he'd like people to call in, atheists to call in and talk about the good work that they do. And I'm not bragging, but I am very proud of what I do. In the years I've been, I focus mostly on cats because I relate best to cats. I've helped some dogs also, but the number measures in the thousands that I've helped save, and I am genuinely proud of that. A lot of times people tell me that I'm doing God's work, and my response to that is, well, rather open atheism. I say something like, if there were an all-powerful, all-loving God in charge of the universe, then atheists like me would not have to be needed to help rescue his most innocent and most vulnerable creatures.
Sure.
If it's God's work, like, why isn't he doing the work?
Yeah.
It's always my
Are we talking about the God who drowned all the animals in that big flood, right?
Yeah, there's that, and sometimes I just say, "Oh, I wish he'd do his own damn work."
Yeah, right. That would be my exact response. Because if I don't show up for work and my boss is like, Jmike, I'm doing your work for you, like that's usually not a good thing, right? It's not like,
yeah. But AR, so we got a couple of callers that I still want to get to. So let's dig in here. So what is the question or the claim here we're exploring?
Well, actually, the one of you paraphrased Satuf, and I'm cursing him now for forever ruining analogies for the program. But
just as a point of contention, Sitif's pronouns are she, her, I believe. So we're not.
I'm sorry, my mistake.
All good.
I try to respect people's pronouns, but I'm not batting 1,000 there.
Sure.
Anyway,
you might not have seen
one of you said this demonstrate why a woman should not have bodily autonomy. Can you demonstrate why a cow or a pig should not have bodily autonomy?
Well, that was in reference to something I said. Yeah, so it's also going to help kind of understand my background from like a meta-ethical standpoint. I think when we talk about like morality or what good is in virtue of values that people have. So I don't know that there's this like objective good or objective wrong. I'm more of a humanist. So I care more about the flourishing of human species. But as of recently, I think I said on one of the last show was that I've actively tried to be vegan because I do care about the suffering of conscious creatures, obviously. But my principle doesn't start with like all conscious creatures, animals included, should be just inherently respected. Though I empathize and sympathize with that position. I'm still trying to work it out from the veganist standpoint. I just don't know that aligns with my set of values, is really what it comes down to.
Okay. Well, I tend to broaden the well-being, respecting well-being of conscious creatures, not just respecting the well-being of human conscious creatures, because they all suffer. And I don't think you can demonstrate that one suffers more than the other. But I actually have a couple of thought experiments that might help you on the way to becoming vegan. I'm assuming that we can agree that animal abuse is wrong and that what animals go through on the way to becoming food constitutes abuse. Can we?
I would say without a doubt, factory farming would definitely fall in the realm of animal abuse. That many of the practices that we have are absolutely reprehensible in terms of how we. I hate to even say care for animals when they're being prepped for slaughter. It's disgusting.
Oh, it is. And so even if we agree that the maybe 1% of animals who are not killed through factory farming don't go through abuse, we're in 99% agreement there. So I have a couple of thought experiments and I actually found it rather easy to become vegan. I went to vegetarianism first, but I found so many meat alternatives, plant-based meat alternatives.
So practically, sorry to cut you off, but practically that's my hang up, right? Not to make this about the diet show of Jmike, but that's a lot of my problem, because really all it comes down to for me is I agree, I value suffering, obviously, in terms of I don't want things to suffer. I can only relate to what a human is like to suffer because I only know what it's like to be a human. So I'm not trying to say that there's some lesser form of suffering or something, but my values align there first. The issue I have is that when I've actually tried to be a vegan, I've felt awful, like absolutely terrible. Diet-wise, food-wise, I never feel full, never feel satisfied. I feel sick, and I tried this for a very long time, so it wasn't just a getting into it thing. So for me, my body just didn't run the same. It didn't feel like it ran the same, and that could be the fact that of what I'm used to growing up. But then there's also this issue that where I live in America, in a lot of ways, I'm forced to consume certain things, especially with an income that I have. Can't necessarily just go spend top dollar things right. So there's just pragmatic reasons on why I can't be a vegan, even though I agree that the suffering aspect is something that I align with. So I'm just gonna agree that there's an inconsistency. But right, it's like saying to a smoker who goes, I know it's going to cause me cancer, and you just go tell them, hey, you shouldn't smoke. Like, I know, trust me, I know it's hard, So it's like I agree. I'm just not going to necessarily say that I've fallen through with it successfully.
You know, and let me dovetail on that just a smidge. So there's a thing that I'm very fascinated by and interested in, a movement called effective altruism, where people are sort of trying to figure out how to effectively live like financially ethical lives, where you're trying to figure out how, you know, money that you donate to various causes can be most effectively used, and trying to really parse out the difference between feeling like you're doing good and actually doing good. And in learning about this, there are a number of individuals who I've found who take their salaries and then they calculate sort of a minimum amount of money that they can survive on. And then they commit to doing that. And every other money that they make, everything over that minimal amount, they donate to charity. All of it. They commit to living lives of poverty so that they can try to alleviate the suffering of others. Do I know that is well, do I know that that's a virtuous thing that they're doing? Absolutely. Do I care about the suffering and the well-being of others? Totally. Am I going to do that? Not a fucking chance. There's no way I'm going to do that. And I have nothing but respect for the people who do it. So I know that there's some inconsistency there. Like I could be a more ethical person. I could go that extra mile. I could do like what Jesus tells the Christians to do that none of them do, which is to sell everything that you have and give that money to the poor. I could do that. I'm not going to. So yeah, maybe I have more work to do in terms of figuring out where my ethical line is. But I kind of feel the same way about veganism, that it's like a very virtuous thing that people are doing. I want to minimize the effect of things like factory farming. But for whatever reason, I just can't get myself there in terms of just fully committing to a vegan lifestyle. And I've done like something maybe similar to what Jmike was describing, where I tried living like a plant-based life for a couple months last year. And yeah, I felt terrible and went back to eating meat. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe there's something wrong with me.
It's not for me to say, no, you didn't feel that way, because that will be ridiculous. But I wanted to get to my thought experiments. One is a 2-button thought experiment. One, you push a button and you get food and no animals suffered. And 2, you push a button, you get food and animals suffered. Which one is the more moral choice, or which one is the moral choice, I would say?
So I don't like the phrasing of it, because like I said, when you say what's the more moral choice, to me, that assumes objective morality, which I deny. So my answer is that there is no more moral choice. There is a more moral choice in virtue of my values.
With respect to certain goals and values. Sure.
I'm a subjectivist. So the truth value of moral propositions ultimately depend on me. Okay. And so a lot of people have issues with this, and I get it. We can get into issues of implications people might think that has. I debate about it too, so you can watch videos on that if you want. But what I wanted to say real fast, that I take one in virtue of my values, but there is no objective value out there in the world that says like you should do 1 over 2. I just reject that as a notion.
Okay, if I agree that that's why it's subjected. That's why I sort of preface this by saying, can we agree that animal abuse is wrong, and that what animals go through on the way to becoming food constitutes abuse?
Sure. I just wanted to draw a line to say that there is no objective. Like if I say that yes, one is more wrong, we have not established to somebody who disagrees that is what we ought to do. We've done no work to establish that. I
can actually go. I can go along with that. So we have to have obviously on any discussion of morality, we have to find some common ground, and that's why I wanted to find the common ground before doing the thought experiment.
100%. Yeah, you've done nothing wrong. I'm just being overly pedantic. So.
Okay. Well, I'll try to do something wrong today at some point. Anyway, the other thing is that if I allow that these animals, cows that contribute their milk for dairy, or their flesh for meat, or pigs for meat, if I allow for them that they are conscious creatures, if I could communicate to them while I'm in the frozen food section, because I mean, look, I like ice cream. I don't eat it anymore because there are soy-based alternatives to ice cream. But before I found these, I had to resist daily whenever I would go to the supermarket buying ice cream. And I imagined myself looking into the long-suffering eyes of a cow who had been in a cage only slightly larger than herself, who had her offspring robbed from her every time she gave birth so that the milk would go to ice cream and milk rather than her babies. What would I say to her to justify the suffering that I was contributing to? And the answer was nothing. I had to look, ultimately, I had to look towards my own empathy.
Right.
And I don't know if this is going to help you get there. Because I recall Jmike, maybe last week or the week before, saying that, if there was someone who could, say something to help them along the way. And I hope maybe this does. And also try eating a whole lot of pasta.
What I was going to say was providing the actual thing for me to buy and eat, and it doesn't kill the bank, because I am a broke college student. So if it doesn't kill the bank, then that's more the advice. I already agree with right. Well, and I would agree with the value assessment. Go, yeah, I would care about the suffering of that animal, right? The difference from me and from that aspect is more of a practical and pragmatic one. It's just I'm gonna agree that I'm inconsistent at some point, but that's not the only place in my life I'm inconsistent. And I think I said this on the last show as well. I call my family more. There's a lot of things I could do more of, right? And that I'm inconsistent with. I don't know a single person that doesn't. I don't want to prop that up as an excuse. I just want to prop that up as I recognize it, and I do want to work towards it. But if I go on suffering and feeling like shit because of my efforts to not make someone else, or it's not someone else, but some food source that has already been killed and ready for me to eat, then I don't really know how I get around that. And that's what it comes down to. If someone can actually provide that, then that issue goes away from me.
Yeah.
There's a faulty reasoning there, because yes, you're consuming the meat of animals who have already been killed, but by buying that meat, you are giving financial incentive for the next ones to be killed and tortured.
Well, there's always going to be I mean, I agree with you, but there's going to be financial, I don't know that it's going to be a successful mission to change that from the perspective, because you're talking about subjective values that people hold, and you know what I mean? Like, the fact that I can recognize that and make the move is one thing, but you have a whole other ball game of trying to get someone else to either recognize that they do have that value, and then to admit, that they're inconsistent, and then also, if they don't have that value, for them to change values and recognize that they should. Right. There's that whole ball game to play before then. And then you could talk about that somehow changing the effect. But as long as we're in a capitalistic society where there's profit to be gained, I don't know that stops, but that's just my opinion. So.
And honestly, this conversation is an interesting one. I feel like this would be a great one for the Talk Heathen Facebook group, where people can pitch in all kinds of different ideas, and we can bat this thing around and explore it. In the meantime, we do have more callers to get to. Thank you very much for calling in. I want to get to, just because I'm always saying, the theists get priority. So we've got a theist on the line that I want to get to. So we've got Zealous in Missouri, who is saying, just want to talk about the existence of God being logical, and wants to use another analogy. So, Zealous, let's talk about the existence of God.
Hey, what's up, boys? What's up? What's happening? Basically, the existence of God, to me, I think it's very, very stupid logically. It's reasonable to me to give the analogy of a game system or an Oculus or anything that delves into another realm from one realm to the next, seeable and unseeable, and stuff like that. Because so this is what I'm gonna say. After being into animation and stuff like that, and all this stuff, this virtual reality stuff, before it was all popular, or whatever. Just studying it, I was like, dude, is that not like the analogy of our own being right now? Like we come from a realm that we did not even know about. We never, we didn't exist there, but there was particles put together to make us come to existence, saying the order. So I'm thinking,
So Zealous, if I understand you right, the more that we have purported evidence towards things, or the more that we learn about the world around us, right, the more things that creep in, right, the more things that we start to know. I mean, that's we don't start from knowing everything. So clearly you have to get to this point, and some of that knowledge that creeps in is going to be, whoa, okay, this is not what I expected. And then if you use like the virtual analogy or virtual reality, which by the way, I have an Oculus. I love video games and specifically virtual reality. So I like that example. This is kind of like Plato's example of the cave. He has this idea where there's people locked up or chained together from birth. And one of them, throughout their whole life, all they see are shadows of people walking by, casted by the firelight, right? So all they ever see are these 2D shadows and shapes on the wall. And one day, one of them breaks free and goes outside the cave, right? Blinded by light, sees that there's depth, that there's color, that there's three-dimensional shapes, right? And he rushes back in and tells the other prisoners, there's this whole world out there that's right. It's three-dimensional. It's got all this stuff that's what's being casted as shadows is not the real reality. And they all laugh, right? What are you talking about? That's not been presented. That could be the case, right? There could be some scenario which we're not prevalent to, but the problem is you have to actually demonstrate it. The difference is, right, you're rational in believing that once that person demonstrates to them, hey, look, here's the real world, right? Because it actually manifests itself in reality. Religious claims don't do that. They just hide in this category of it being hidden. So there's like this sliver of hope that maybe it exists, right? But the problem is I can do that with any claim I want that hasn't been proven. It can hide in that category, right? That's the problem.
It can. But okay. So I know what you're saying, because you can go into allegories, different type of analogies to like attach it to that. Yeah, that makes sense. And so many moral lessons you can like tie to any lie to that situation. But we're talking about realities. We're talking about the biology. That everything that makes us a human is being imitated by this realm. And it's not, even though anybody can make an attachment to something. But what I'm saying to you, this is like one of the closest to match with the physical realm, the game realm and the physical realm. And our
you mean like a simulation?
But not to be, I don't want to make it seem like everything is everything. I don't want to do that. I'm specifically saying this because there's an argument being said, in the atheist world and the theist world. They're both saying, one of them is saying there's no God, there's no possible evidence for him, or how we even know if there's even evidence.
Right? So me and Kenneth both don't hold that position though. So let's stop right there. Like, look, I'm a Gnostic atheist. Real fast, Silas. I'm a Gnostic atheist, which means I don't think gods exist in all the conceptions or God hypothesis that have been presented to me. I'm a Gnostic atheist, but I have to be agnostic towards some conception that you could just make up right now, because I can't know. I don't have a logical contradiction in the concept of God to give to somebody, and so that's not the case. We merely have we just don't accept the proposition that the God exists. But if you tell me that the Christian God exists, I'll go further and say that God doesn't exist, and I can demonstrate that to you through various or a myriad of different.
Zealous. I'd like to try to just break this call down to the simplest possible terms. Okay, just because we are starting to run a little bit short on time, and I just want to try to tighten this up. Okay,
I don't feel like I'm part of the conversation. Really, half of it, because we kind of said a little bit. And you guys ran with it for a little bit. I just wanted to just make
right. So that's what I'm doing is I want to return to the original thing here and give you an opportunity. So it sounds to me like what you're saying is that it's like, wouldn't it be interesting if reality is like a video game and God is the person playing the video game? And if that's what you were saying, wouldn't that be interesting?
No.
I would be like, you have to listen. You have to listen. If that was what you were saying, I would be like, yeah, that'd be interesting. But what it says here on the call screening thing is that it is logical to say that God is like the person playing a video game, and that is the reality that we are all in. And I don't know how you would establish that as being the case. Is that what you're saying? Is that God is like a person playing a video game of reality?
Not exactly. I was saying God would be like the creator in my analogy. What you're saying could be entertained, but not. Okay. But you could, what I'm saying is that one could exist outside of the physical realm, the known realm that we know.
We have a demonstration.
Wait.
Zealous, do we have a demonstration of that?
Zealous, let me make sure I understand what you're saying. It sounded to me, Zealous,
ask the question.
Zealous, hang on. I got to ask you this. So it sounded like what you just said is that it's possible for a creator God to exist somewhere outside of reality. Is that what you just said?
I believe they can do both. Yes, believe both. Yeah.
Both what? What are the both?
The both is going in and out of different realms. Like, for example, like what we talked about was the Oculus a little bit. And it could be that we late and delayed in what we know right now because we were not the pre-existing. And this being we right on this pre-existing state, he probably had foreknowledge way before we even had our Oculus or even come into existence. Because we have a gradual thing.
I'm sorry that I keep butting in, but I have to kind of control the show. So you're making claims about what could be and about what's probable with respect to an entity that exists outside of reality, but then can also exist within reality. And my only question for you, the big question is, how do you know that thing could exist?
Oh, then I jump from that realm just knowing that it's very possible based on our latency of intelligence and stuff like that, but still giving us credit. But I jump from that to specifics, like what you talked about when it comes to Christianity, right? Or any other religion.
You're 10 steps ahead of answering the question. I'm just asking you really simply and straightforwardly. How do you know that this God could exist?
Zealous, you didn't answer the question.
You got to slow down, man.
If you let me answer it, I'll actually say it like out of respect for real. This happens in Clubhouse too. It's like I know we don't know each other. That's the reason why we're not able to actually know if that person knows.
No, there's a difference. This is a show.
All I'm asking you to do is just answer the question.
So I want to give you the floor, and we're trying to keep it on track.
Yeah, I want to give you the floor so you can answer the question. So just again, the question is, and when you're talking, you're not hearing what I'm saying. The question is, how do you know this God could exist?
Brother, that's if you let me answer it, I will answer it.
So answer it.
What I call it.
Answer it. Just answer it.
It should start with because and then
answer the question.
Yeah.
Because
why?
Okay, so
if the next words out of your mouth aren't answering the question, I'm dropping the call. How do you know this God could exist?
Okay. All right. Because first of all, when you deal with the let's see. So you have physical evidence. You have physical evidence for the stories in the Bible. For example, the things that he said that would happen in the Old Testament, not just would happen, but that has happened, which is archaeology, and also interpersonal evidence and stuff like that.
All right, hold on, Zealous. I'm not going to let you glance over that. Hold on. No, I deny that. You say when you look at things. No, I look at things in the Bible. I see claims that doesn't get you to look. You said it's logical to get you there, which presumes that there's some inference that you could follow that gets you there. And Kenneth asked, "How do you know that?" So what's that inference? You can't just say the book says a thing that doesn't do anything for a non-believer. They're just gonna go seriously.
It sounded like you said there's evidence from the Bible. So what would be
the most skeptical person? I understand.
What would be an example?
Is grant a little bit of understanding of what I'm about to say. I'm not going to fly off. I got to make the statement and then actually justify it, and that's why you gave me the opportunity. When I said that, it hit a nerve because it has to be justifiable. If I get to go through it a little bit, that's why I was going through breaking it down. Archaeologically, these stories, a lot of things that's in the Old Testament, not everything, but I would say they're just documenting stuff. But when they have
give me one example. Because of time constraints, Ellis, give me one example.
I talk too fast, I guess. That's what it is. I talk too fast.
No, it's all good. Just give me one example.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing. I literally said it. If anybody was listening, I said Red Sea chariot.
You said archaeological. You said
Wait,
archaeological.
hang on, Jmike. So you're saying, did you say Red Sea chariots?
Yeah, and this is only one, but this is not even without skepticism. This is not even without skepticism. Skepticism will be invited after the claim and after people research. Now, this is what I believe about skepticism and also making the claim. Anytime when it comes to atheists and theists and stuff like that, anytime someone makes a claim, I'm not gonna put down anybody that's going to skepticize it, because you have to do the skepticism step. You have to. So what I'm saying to you is this: I feel like from watching this, being an alien here on this earth, watching people, I see after the claim is made. This is what I'm saying. I'm just saying after the claim is made, it seems like people automatically assume this doesn't exist because somebody doubted it. The point of doubt does not make something not exist.
Zealous, that's not what anybody is saying. What we're saying, nobody's saying. I doubt that your claim has been Zealous, real fast. I'm not gonna let this go past. You can't straw man the position and go, because a person might doubt what is said, that it doesn't exist. That's not the position, right? The position is that it either is substantiated or it isn't, and I'm rational in accepting it.
We need to break this down to an even simpler place. So Zealous, hang on, buddy. I want to help you out. So so a moment ago, let's just keep this super simple, okay? Because we are very short on time. So you said Red Sea chariots. Are you under the impression that chariots were found at the bottom of the Red Sea?
No, I'm under the impression of studying it, and then also the scientists reporting it.
Okay, so that's just a simple yes. So let me just go down this track with you. Okay. So
if we stop at each point, we have to stop. We have to stop at each station. That's good. But just know there's more detail to everything. It's not
Zealous. I'm muting you because you're going down a rabbit track, and this is so simple. Okay, what I'm about to do with you. Okay, so whether or not I believe you or not, let's say for the sake of discussion that chariot components, let's say a whole bunch of chariots, full chariots, were found in the bottom of the Red Sea. What does that have to do with a God existing?
Hello?
Yeah, Zealous, I asked you a question. If they found chariots at the bottom of the Red Sea, what does that have to do with a God existing?
Okay, so what it has to do with the God existing, with this God specifically, I believe there's one God, but what it has to do with it, I believe that if he says elements were involved, I'm going to say this very quick, and then I'm going to say a little small point, and then I'm going to give it back to you. But I'm going to say if there's elements involved, whichever elements those are, in a location, a specific location, and there's catastrophic events like Sodom and Gomorrah and Red Sea chariots and stuff like that. If they're saying these things are here, God did this and that, and it's about the details that makes it weird or makes it like very majestical or crazy or unbelievable, or
Zealous. How do you get from hang on, buddy, hang on. How do you get from there are chariots at the bottom of a Red Sea to God did it?
For us in the Bible, he gives details. It's not just all in the air. It's about the details.
Zealous.
No, we know that's the claim.
Zealous. How do you get from there are chariots at the bottom of a body of water to God did it? How do you get there?
I'm not muted. Okay. So how do I get there? By the Bible, basically.
But that's the claim.
Let me hang on. How did you rule out a boat crossing the Red Sea carrying chariots sinking?
You said a boat?
Yep.
Well, I don't.
A chariot salesman is traveling across the Red Sea, and his boat sank. And there are chariots. There are ancient Egyptian chariots at the bottom of the Red Sea. How did you rule out a boat sinking?
A boat sinking. I don't know what you're talking about. A boat sinking. I didn't rule it. So okay. I get what you're saying. Okay, I get it.
Yeah.
I get it. Okay. So this is good. This is good. Thank you. Okay. So now, for me, what I've seen from the story is not just about chariots in the bottom floor. It's more details. about the okay, so in this, please stop calling me. Okay. In this, on the other side, on the Nueva Beach, across the other side, Solomon puts the pillars there, and he tells you this is where it's at. Then, where they cross over. Okay, just dig with me very quick on this one, and I'm trying to get this done very quick. But on each side of this drop, there's a 300 feet drop in the water. This is what they was able to see. This is the scientists get to see this. A 300 feet drop on each side, and a 300 feet lift in the middle where they found it at. Now just suppose this. If they was like a mile over or so, or whatever, or a couple miles over to the right, they would have went into all type of bottomless, like not bottomless, but just mountains. A 300 feet drop would have been
right. But this is the deal, and we're running so short on time, Zealous. But this is important because here's what you've done. You're making claims, okay? You're saying chariots were found at the bottom of a body of water, okay? But you have not, you are not doing anything to demonstrate how those chariots got there or how you figured out that other candidate explanations aren't what happened. You're doing nothing to get from chariots to God.
But
yeah,
I'm being controlled in the doing something.
Yeah, can I just add one thing, by the way, that's important to this. You said it's an archaeological discovery. Have you actually just Googled whether or not that's
I've done more than most people.
Okay, so then you would know that the source of where that comes from is from a website that's not of archaeological.
It's not a website.
Basis.
It's actually it's a group of people. It's people, not just a website. I don't do websites only. This is actually, you can find this to a site.
So
okay. What Jmike is doing, I was tempted to do, but this is the deal. Because listen, I'm just going to say it.
I would just say Google it.
Jmike.
Yeah. My point is what this comes from. At least if you're talking about the chariot wheels, it comes from a claim made by World News something organization. I can't remember. It's a World News Daily Report.
A bullshit website.
Website, and they use terms like Egypt's antiquities mystery. Listen, real fast. I'm not done. They make claims, and they say in the article that like Egypt's and antiquities ministry, like they use terminology to get people that go, oh, that sounds about right. And then they believe in it because they already believe. Look, you already believed in this.
This is it.
You did not stumble upon this and then go, oh, this proves Jesus. You're doing what's called post hoc rationalizing, right? You're already believing this thing, and then a source that, by the way, is demonstrably false and is fake has convinced you that there's actually these things. Which, by the way, to a bigger point, which is Kenneth's point, is that there's no logical inference from chariot wheels to God or full-fledged chariots. Like, you still have the question of how do you not know of any other circumstance where the same result could happen, right? It doesn't, there's no logical inference to supernatural God, which, by the way, the call screener put that this was a logical thing to God. You've not provided the inference. So I don't know where the logic is.
Okay,
but.
so I get what you're saying. I'm glad you made closure with that. That makes a lot of sense. You're saying it. You can't rule out. Okay, I love how you said that. You said do not rule. Okay, what made you rule out somebody losing chariots on a boat or something like that? That was good. I love that. That's where I could work from. But again, I know you have to put the case on the table in order for it to be on the table at least. And if somebody keeps wiping off the table, that's cool. But at least know that this is the understanding of this and that. I didn't read some kind of article, what you just read, or whatever you guys have with that. There's more studies about this. So when it comes to not just this, it's more other stories, like the Sodom and Gomorrah stories. Believe me, as a skeptic, I can write off anything. I'm a pro at being a skeptic. It's very good. But I'm telling you,
don't jump to Ron Wyatt. Please don't jump to Ron Wyatt. Have you been reading or listening to Ron Wyatt?
Yeah, I didn't even. But that's presumption right there. That's a presumption. But again, people that are part of it, you can't just criminalize people that are part of stuff. You know,
I'm just asking you, is Ron Wyatt your source for Sodom and Gomorrah stuff?
No, actually, the guy who I actually was watching was I don't even know his name actually. But a lot of the findings, you can't criminalize the person of the finding and stuff like that. This is open to so many people. If you what do you call that? What did Martin King say? I think not what he's. But anyway, basically, if you criminalize somebody, you make someone look at as a bad person, or just like, hey, atheist, stay away from this guy because you know why? He fights against what we actually, believe in, what we go against. We're skeptics against him. So let's go against him.
We're going to end on this. What is? Give me in 30 seconds or less. Give me what's the evidence for Sodom and Gomorrah? Is it pillars of salt?
Sodom and Gomorrah.
Is it sulfur in the ground?
No, it's not just sulfur. Basically, I feel like based off, like when I debated Islam, they didn't have evidence for the things that they said was there. They said that this and that was there. It wasn't even there.
None of you guys have evidence for the things you claim.
Yeah, they are just as convinced as you are. Isn't that interesting?
Stop calling the
Christianity, you can't treat them the same. Because
I can't treat them the same. They both have no epistemic merit. What are you talking about?
I feel like the worst theist is the person who says that something is there, and they say something is there, and the elements are not even really at least there on the table. Like to me, it's already scary to say that there's a God that did all this stuff, and then go research it. That's even more scarier. Because
it's not about being zealous. It's not about being scary. Look. Let's go back to pillars of salt or whatever, right? You think there's evidence to prove the claim. The problem is, it's really simple. It's really simple. People can write down things that actually happened. They can go, oh, you know what? There's this. There's Judea. There's this place over here, right? They can write down things, and we could go back and go, oh, okay, it's the case that this thing existed. So, somebody right now could go, or 1,000 years from now, could say that there was some big explosion, and it was so big it reached during a Talk Heathen call. It started in Atlanta, where I live, and then it traveled all the way where Kenneth is at, right? And it obliterated the show, and it was over, right? In that radius. And we could point out when somebody goes, well, there was a Jmike, there was a Kenneth, there was a Talk Heathen, there was an Atlanta, Georgia. Like none of that would actually, once we find those elements, wouldn't substantiate the claim that there was this big explosion that engulfed us, right? That would just be an entirely separate thing.
A real easy way to do this is to say someone could in the future could look back at New York City and they could find a Spider-Man costume.
Exactly.
And then look at the Spider-Man comics. And that Spider-Man costume is not evidence that Peter Parker fought Dr. Octopus on the Brooklyn Bridge, right? You see what I'm saying? So look,
we presume that is already false already, that is just a cartoon or something similar like that. And that's already presuming that it's already in
the presumption is not that anything is false. The presumption is not that anything is false.
I'm saying to you, we're dealing with our reality. We're not dealing with the comic book. We're dealing with stuff that's elegant.
I beg to differ that we're dealing with a comic book.
We're trying to deal with reality. So listen, we got to wrap the show, but yeah, this is the whole thing. All right, is that the arguments that you're trying to make here, like Mike said, there's no inference here. You're not tying the evidence or lack thereof to a conclusion. Okay, so we got to wrap. So thank you to our incredible cast and crew here, Jmike, you're the man. I love getting to host with you. We'll be back in 3 weeks, right? Or 4 weeks doing this thing again.
Yeah, we will.
Can we get to the crew cam real fast? I know we've gone over. This has been a long one. Thank you guys so much for everything that you do. Thank you to the mods. Thank you to everybody out there. Let's get some love rings going. If you're an essential worker, like the people in our crew who are essential, everything that they do, we love you, we value you, we appreciate you. And whether or not you're an essential worker, we just want to thank you for tuning in. We really appreciate it. If you don't believe, this is your community. We're here for you. I hope you get plugged into the Facebook group. Take advantage of the fact that this is a community. We want to connect with you, fellow heathens out there. And listen, if you do believe, we don't hate you.
We just aren't convinced.
Take care.
We want the truth, so watch Truth Wanted live Fridays at 7 p.m. Central. Visit tiny.cc/YTTW and call into the show at 512-991-9242 or connect to the show online at tiny.cc/calltw.